Good morning. Hope your Wednesday's off to a good start. Mine is so far. I've got a good second cup of coffee, and hope that you're good wherever you are with a good cup of coffee. For this morning, we're going to talk about the Old Testament. One of the things that I, as a preacher, enjoy the most is taking a passage of the Old Testament that's might be obscure and finding a way to take it to the cross. I just love doing that as a preacher, finding the gospel in some relatively obscure part of the Old Testament is just fun for me. I love doing that. And I enjoy preaching the Old Testament. So for this morning, I'm going to talk about that. A lot of Christians really don't read the Old Testament, unfortunately. They just don't open it up very much. And who knows why? Perhaps some would say that it's irrelevant. The Old Testament is irrelevant now. It doesn't matter. Jesus has come. We don't need to bother with what Amos said way back when. And for heaven's sakes, we don't need to bore ourselves with Leviticus or Deuteronomy. Or they might say there's just too much blood and gore. We don't need that blood and gore in the Old Testament, or it's too hard to understand. Or can't we just read the red letters? Can't we just read the red letters? We don't need to bother with the Old Testament, and really, for that matter, we don't need to bother with Paul's letters. We're just going to focus on the red letters, the words that Jesus said. So, for this morning, I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons for why we should read the Old Testament. These are in no particular order. My top 5 reasons for why Christians should read and study the Old Testament. Number 1, reason for why we should read the Old Testament is that we cannot understand the New Testament without it. Some New Testament books really are so filled with quotes and references and allusions to the Old Testament that you quite literally cannot understand the books without some knowledge of the Old Testament. In particular, the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews is drips with Old Testament allusions and references and quotations. The book of Revelation is the same way. Revelation has dozens of Old Testament references. Maybe not direct quotes, but dozens of Old Testament references. Or the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is the most Jewish of the Gospels and presents Jesus as the fulfillment of the prophetic hopes and aspirations, and you can't get that if you don't know any of the Old Testament. You just simply cannot understand the New Testament without having read the Old. Jesus is he's prophesied in the Old Testament. He's the long hoped for and anticipated Messiah. And if you have no knowledge of what the prophet said, no knowledge of the hopes and aspirations of ancient Israel, how can you begin to understand the ministry of Jesus? There's an old saying that I really like, and it's something like this: that the New Testament is in the Old concealed. The Old Testament is in the New revealed. I'm going to read that again. The New Testament is in the Old concealed. The Old Testament is in the New revealed. That all of the truths that we find in the New Testament are in the Old. They're hidden, but they are there. And all the things that might seem murky to us in the Old Testament are revealed in the New. The two go hand in hand. Number 2, reason why, and again, these are in no particular order. Number two reason why we should read the Old Testament is that is the Bible that Jesus and Paul used. That is the Bible that Jesus and Paul used. When Paul wrote in 2 Timothy that all Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching and reproof and correction, etc., etc., when he wrote that, he's referring to the Old Testament because, well, the New Testament hadn't been written yet. It was in the process of being written. It hadn't been collected together. So when Paul says all Scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, etc., etc., he's talking about his Scriptures, which would be the Old Testament. The Scriptures that were read in the synagogues every Sabbath in Jesus' day and in Paul's day are our Old Testaments. Jesus especially loved to quote from, he quoted Scripture all the time. He quoted Scripture all the time, in particular Isaiah and the Psalms. And Jesus quotes Scripture, and Jesus quoting Scripture is quoting Old Testament. Again, because when Jesus is around, there is no New Testament yet. Some people refer to the Old Testament now as the Hebrew Bible, or as the First Testament, and perhaps there's something good about that, because in the very term Old Testament, we can think old means, well, out of date. Old as in obsolete, and that is not the case. The Old Testament does not mean old as in out of date or obsolete. It simply preceded. In terms of when it was written, it preceded the New Testament, but it's not old in terms of obsolete or out of date. It's been several months ago, I saw this news story on the Babylon Bee. The Babylon Bee is a satirical news site. Some of it is political satire, some is religious satire, and it was a news story about somebody purporting to auction off the original King James Bible that the Apostle Paul used. And it was hilarious. This picture of this really big, thick Bible, and the story, and somebody is auctioning off the original King James Bible that the Apostle Paul used, which is, I love the article, and is good for us. We remember that when Paul is referring to Scripture, when Jesus quotes Scripture, they are referring to their Scriptures, the Old Testament. Okay, so the first reason is we study the Old Testament because we can't understand the New without it. We study the Old Testament because it's the Bible that Jesus and Paul used, which means it's pretty good. We study the Old Testament, number 3, because of all the characters in it. Imagine a Christian life without knowing of Abraham and Isaac, or Rebecca, who had enough faith to go and marry somebody that she never met, or Rahab, or Moses, or Daniel, or Jonah, or Noah and the flood, or David, for the great things that he did and for the terrible things that he did. Imagine not knowing any of that. And if there are people in there that I mentioned that you're not familiar with, go back to your Old Testament. Okay, so number 4. We need the Old Testament to know the nature of God. I had somebody say one time in a Bible study that I was leading that God had changed. That you've got the wrathful God, the vengeful God of the Old Testament, and then the God of grace and mercy in the New Testament. So Old Testament God always has his finger on the cosmic smite button to smite people. And then the New Testament God is, a warm and cuddly God. In fact, there was an ancient heresy called Gnosticism, which went so far as to say that there were two separate gods altogether. That you have an evil God that creates everything, and then you've got the good God that sends Jesus. And nothing could be further from the truth. Definitely not the heresy known as Gnosticism, and not even the notion that God has changed, that God changes between Old Testament and New, that somewhere along the way, maybe 200 or 300 BC, that God changed. No. God is the same. God is the same from beginning to end. And we know the nature of God in reading the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, you'll find this over and over again. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. The Lord your God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. You don't find, that's Old Testament stuff. That's Old Testament. That's not New. That's Old Testament. You can't understand the faithfulness of God apart from the Old Testament. You read the Old Testament from beginning to end, and you see through that the faithfulness of God. God creates this covenant with his people, and for as terribly as the people foul up, God is always there with them. In the Old Testament, we have so strongly taught this idea of the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord, the day that God himself will intervene in human history to right all the ancient wrongs, to vindicate the oppressed and judge the wicked. That's Old Testament. And in the New Testament, Paul just sort of reinterprets that in light of Jesus. That's all Old Testament stuff. And then lastly, so to recap where we've been, number one reason why we read the Old Testament, again, these are no particular order, because we can't understand the New Testament without it. And secondly, we read the Old Testament because it's the Bible that Jesus and Paul used. And then thirdly, think about all of the characters we would miss. All the characters we'd miss: Jonah and Noah and David and Daniel and Rebecca and Abraham and Isaac and Sarah and Rahab and Elijah. Think of all of those characters that we would miss. And then next, we need the Old Testament, and we read the Old Testament to know the nature of God. And lastly, the Old Testament contains God's first communication with humanity. God's first communication with humanity is in the Old Testament. So just let that think in for a minute. Let that sink in for a minute. That God in ages past, God first spoke to humanity. And how did he choose to do it? In ancient Hebrew. God is not bound by human language. For whatever reason, known only to God, God chose a Semitic guy named Abram. we know him now as Abraham. God chose a Semitic guy named Abram and spoke to Abram in ancient Hebrew. God's first communication to humanity is in the Old Testament. And why would we not want to read the first words that God spoke to humanity? The very first words inspired by God. The very first words inspired by God. Bereshit Barak Elohim Eth HaShamayim Eth HaAretz. My feeble attempt at the Hebrew wording of Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Or fast forward a few chapters, and you can hear the very first words that God spoke, direct quotes. Why do we not want to read the first recorded words about God's relationship with people, and the very first recorded words that God spoke to people? So when we go to seminary, or you go to a synagogue and you learn Hebrew, as someone once said, you're learning God's language. That's the language that God chose to first communicate with his people. So those are 5 reasons why I think we should read the Old Testament. We can't understand the New without it. It's the Bible that Jesus and Paul used. It's full of really fascinating and colorful people. When we read the Old Testament, we know something of the nature of God. And when we read the Old Testament, we're reading the very first communication between God and his people. So in the comments, if there are other reasons you can think of for why we should read the Old Testament, mention them. Hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday.